Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to our session on databases for tracking research impacts. My name is Karen Peterman. I have a small research and evaluation firm in Durham, North Carolina. And over the past few years, we've done lots of work to think about how to set up databases to try to collect process data, really kind of the bean counting kinds of data in meaningful ways. And we also do a lot of work related to evaluation and research of public engagement with science programs. And so this session is kind of a culmination of those two areas of our work. In 2021, I had the opportunity to be an ARIS Fellow with my colleague, Alison Blackmeyer, who you'll meet in just a second. And today we're going to show some of the results from our work. Before we get much further, I am going to ask them to introduce themselves. If you all out there who have tuned in have not had a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, please do that. We're interested in knowing who you are, where you're calling in from today, and the kinds of broader impact work that you do. And while you all are typing that into the chat, I'm going to turn things over to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Alison Blackmeyer. I am a researcher and evaluator with Karen's company, so also based in Durham, North Carolina, and as Karen mentioned, was also a 2021 ARIS Fellow.
Did you want me to jump in, Karen? I'm Nathalie Wolfram. Good morning, everyone. And I direct the Broader Impacts Group at the University of Montana. I'm very excited because my virtual background actually matches the real thing today, usually much snowier here. But I work with principal investigators at our university to help up their broader impacts game. And I'm very excited to be part of this session and to meet you all this morning.
All right, Travis, just in the nick of time, perfectly done. Do you want to jump in and say hi to everybody and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Travis Tangen here at Discovery Connections at UW-Madison. I've got a field trip kind of going on right on the other side of the room, so I'm a little bit late. So I'm glad to be here with everybody, helping support researchers' broader impacts and really kind of making that connectivity across UW-Madison and our Mortgage Institute for Research for helping the researchers make community connections and campus connections.
Great. So that's a little bit about who we are. We do want to take another minute or so to learn about you. There's already some great information in the chat about the roles that people play in relation to broader impacts and research impacts. But we're also interested in what your experience is with tracking broader impacts and research impacts. And so we're interested in if you currently track broader impacts as part of your job. And if you do, the software that you use to track those indicators and the types of data that you collect. So if you could hop back over to the chat really quickly and answer those questions that Alison just put in. So it's 3 things. If you track broader impacts currently, and if so, 2 things about how you do it. What are the systems you're using to collect those data? And then what types of data are you collecting? And I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat for a second to see if I see any immediate responses coming through. I did notice earlier on that we have some people who are situated in research offices and then other people who are new to broader impacts. And so we could have a really good range here today, which will be fun. Thank you, Mary. All right, while folks are typing in their responses, I am going to tell you a little bit more about our fellowship and what brings us all here today. So the fellowship that Alison and I did involved 2 different waves of data collection. We started with interviews with 10 to 12 broader impact professionals to really find out answers to the kinds of questions that you all are answering in the chat right now. So what are they thinking about when it comes to tracking broader impacts and the kinds of work that they're doing? Are they keeping track of the consultations they're doing? I see Kathy just posted that she's tracking consultations. Are people keeping track of who's involved in outreach across campus? Are people keeping track of the kinds of outreach that's happening? And so we had a series of conversations around those kinds of data and the systems people were using. And then we used those conversations to generate a list of needs and interests that we then surveyed the ARIS community about, to find out what people were most interested in and what people were thinking about and doing already. If you're interested in seeing the full list of those results, then we have a one-pager that's available with the session materials for today's workshop session. Allison's also put the link to that in the chat if you want to take a quick peek. One of the things that many community members were interested in was having a chance to see the work that other people are doing. And that's really what brings us here today. So we are going to show you 3 different ways that people can track broader impacts indicators as part of their work. And if I look at the chat, I see a really good range of indicators and systems that people are using that kind of match what we found in the survey that we did last summer. So when we surveyed folks, we found that 2/3 of the people who answered the survey were using relatively simple systems. So using Excel, databases, or maybe Google Sheets to track some of their broader impacts work. About 1/4 of the people weren't using a database at all to track what they were doing. And then we had some people who were doing a lot of tracking. And Nathalie and Travis represent 2 excellent cases that you're going to get to have a tour of today. So part of what you're going to get to see today is 3 different entry points. And so the hope is that you are going to, regardless of whether you're new to these ideas or whether you've been doing this for a while and you're looking to see some of the greatest hits of what other people are playing with, that there's going to be an entry point for you in today's session. So we're going to start with something on the entry level side and then move into more nuanced examples. And what we like about all 3 of these is that even if you're new to this stuff, you can actually enter at any of the 3 points, particularly if you're a bit of an Excel ninja or have some other database skills from some other aspect of your work. All 3 of these are really appropriate entry points depending on the skill set and the interest that you have and bring to the work. Because people in the survey last summer said, we really just kind of want tours. We want to see what other people are doing. We've created videos to show to you today. We were a little bit worried about technical issues. And so we thought if we had a video, that's only one thing that could go wrong instead of lots of screen switching and lots of things to go wrong. So we're going to show you some video clips that are part of a larger series that will eventually be available on the ARIS website as one of the kind of deliverables from our fellowship. We have plenty of time for questions today. And so as we get into the different videos, as we get into the breaks in between them, please put questions in the chat whenever you have them. Alison and I are going to moderate those throughout the session today, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. We've saved plenty of time for that. The other thing, and I think the last thing that I want to say before I turn it over to the really good stuff, is that all of the links that you're going to see today, all of the references that we're going to talk about, the resources we're going to talk about are available in a PDF that is linked to this session in the conference system. And so if you don't want to have to fool with what's about to go in the chat with all these links, just know that that resource is there and you can link to everything that we're going to share after the session today. All right, Alison, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Karen. All right, so for our first demo, we're going to be showing how Google Sheets, which is really similar to Excel, can be a really simple but effective tool, we think, for tracking lots of different kinds of BI Office data. We're going to be focusing on the types of data that we learned from the survey that ARIS community members are most likely to track, and sharing our recommendations for how we would organize and track this type of data. Note that this video doesn't cover how to create all the elements you're going to see, like pivot tables and filters. But if you needed help with that, we recommend checking out some of the other videos that our team has made. And Karen just posted a link in the chat for that. If you want to follow along or try to use the template that we're going to share, you can make a copy of the template by clicking on the link that's in the uploaded document and that Karen is about to post into the chat. So now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and play this first video.
So here's an example of a very simple sheet for tracking attendance at BI workshops. You would be surprised how many people don't track attendance, and so we thought this was a good example to share. So we have just a few basic fields labeled across the top, including important details of the workshop, like the workshop name, date, and lead presenter. And then there's details about each of the workshop attendees, including their name, department, and a few more. You can see that many of our columns have this little triangle on the side, which indicates that we've embedded a drop-down list of options for those cells. If there's a known set of possible responses for a cell, this is a handy trick that really cuts down on data entry errors. You can see that we set up the spreadsheet so that each attendee at each workshop gets their own row. If a workshop had 10 attendees, then you'd need 10 rows for that workshop. It would certainly be simpler to just have one row per workshop. But if you want to be able to use your data to understand which types of attendees are coming to which workshops, then we highly recommend setting it up this way. And so we can move over to the second tab here, where we have a few pivot tables set up that automatically summarize our workshop attendance data. So for example, we can easily know things like how many workshops each person has attended, which departments are most frequently represented, and which types of workshops have been most popular. Next, we have a spreadsheet to track the outreach provided by an office. We have this example sheet set up to track lots of details about the outreach, like the type of event, when it occurred, and who was involved. And then we also include one possible program evaluation that an office might use. In this case, the engagement survey created by the Science Learning Activation Lab. If you're not already familiar, this is a short and simple validated survey that has been used with both kids and adults to measure their self-reported engagement during a science activity. So if an office decides to administer this or a similar survey after each outreach event, you could then track the average scores for each event in this worksheet. As with workshop attendance, we can also use pivot tables. So we could use pivot tables to summarize the number of attendees reached in different ways. And then we can also look at engagement scores by the type of outreach. Finally, we have an example worksheet that you might use to keep track of all partners. So you'll want to include basic contact information for the partner, as well as other information that might be helpful to know, like their focus area, departments they've worked with, and their interest in helping to host and design programming. And then you can use filters to help you look for partners who might be a good fit for a particular opportunity. So for example, you could search for partners who have a particular interest, let's say in health, and then you would check those. And then who also are interested in co-designing to help you identify the right partner for your needs.
And take a look at the chat. Any questions about Google Sheets, about Excel? If not, we do have some questions for our two panelists, Travis and Nathalie, that we can jump to, but wanted to see if anyone first had any technical or clarification questions. All right, well, feel free to paste a question in the chat at any time. Otherwise, we'll bring Travis and Nathalie back in and ask a few questions for you all who are more experienced with databases. So question about how you go, say you're in your office and you don't currently track any data, but you want to start tracking data in a way similar to what we just showed. How do you get started with that? Any tips?
I always fear that I'm a terrible person to ask because I'm not. I believe that an accomplished task is one that you've started in some ways. So get started. And I started tracking on a messy. I'm a handwritten notepad person. And then when I realized that was inadequate, this was several years ago, I created a really basic spreadsheet. And then I started to see, oh, it'd be really useful if I could search this way, or if I could standardize, and add these drop-down menus so that I'm not cleaning my own data. So I'd say get started and don't let perfection be the enemy of a working, functional data set that you can always improve. And you can hire an intern to help you do that so yeah, get started.
I like getting started too, right? Because we're not going to go anywhere. So I agree about being messy at the beginning. One of the things we acknowledge as a team when we're starting on new data tracking is, what might go wrong in terms of just creating the right patterns and processes, and just accountability for the team so that the data is valuable data. But I think even before that, I think what we've come to realize is having the purpose first. So starting almost like a backwards design principle, like what are you doing with this data? Where's the end goal? And then working backwards of how that data would inform your work, your partnership, your stakeholder reporting, whatever it might be. But really identify the purpose first. Once you have that, then it's easier to rationalize and have conversations about tracking new things with your team, with just your own accountability with limited capacity. Like, why am I doing this? What's the purpose? So really defining that helps to provide motivation and then hopefully lead to informing how we all work as broader impacts professionals and increasing our quality of our work.
Yeah, and I think that ties in, Travis, to Mary's comment in the chat about how data like this is used for internal program planning or getting greater support for BI or visibility of BI efforts. And from my perspective, I think the answer is yes, all of those great things. But curious about Travis and Nathalie, what do you guys think? What are some of the top uses of data like the ones that we showed in the video?
Yeah, I'll just start this one out and then we'll maybe go back and forth if that makes it's cool. So part of what we've grown into in terms of usefulness of data, we moved from just kind of reporting out to stakeholders, which is valuable, just inform like what our rationale is, our validity for making connections with the public in different research projects. But it's moved into a tight line with continuous improvement for our team. So thinking about how the data is useful every week, being able to tell stories with it and things like that. I think that's become so important of both collecting, but then seeing where it goes for everybody. It's not just one or two people on the team that sees it go to a report and then they never see the report. That still happens a little bit, but at least some of the other pieces of data still filter through and everybody gets a chance to see why we're collecting things and how we're taking all these pieces of all of our worlds, and then the databases and the processes help to bring them together. So that's been just a nice, a little bit messy, but just overall a really great team improvement. And team being extended partners too, not just our close-knit team.
Yeah, and I'd add, I guess I see the value and the real world function of data collection in two different ways. One, and where I started, to be perfectly pragmatic and honest, is okay, well, I need to justify my office's and my job's existence to the powers that be, our research and creative scholarship sector and my university. And once I got those muscles in shape, then my office started to do more data collection and database design that was a bit more creative and exciting and messy. And I would say one thing I've learned is just being open to the unexpected ways that the data can have use out in the world. So a project that I'll be sharing a bit more about in this session recently got sucked into our university's ongoing strategic planning efforts. I didn't set out with that goal, but by working with partners to build this data set and do some data visualization, it caught the attention of another area of the institution, and that's led to new work. So just having a very open mindset about where your data management and collection might go.
So there's some conversation in the chat about Excel versus Airtable, and as Karen mentioned, Travis is a Airtable wizard, and so we're going to be learning all about Airtable in just a little bit. But before we kind of get to that, jumping up from something like Excel to something more sophisticated like Airtable, what do you guys see? As you both have had experience working in Google Sheets or Excel, what do you see as the benefits of using a simpler system like Excel?
Definitely, I'd say the greater the number of collaborators in the data management efforts, the greater the need for a common familiar software platform, even if it's something with that's easy to learn. If it's not something in the Microsoft Office suite or Google platform, it can turn people away, or in a common. And I've had this response too, like, oh, it's one more icon that I'm going to have to deal with on my navigation bar, so people work with Excel or Google Sheets, and that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, I like that framing too of it has to have this dream or purpose, what I mentioned, but if it's not practical, it's not getting done. So getting to a point where there's common ground is something you just have to be flexible and, maybe not have that dream vision of what it could be because it's impractical and all you're doing is trying to create database accountability, right? Like if you're doing that, there's probably something wrong with your tools or your process that you're trying to do. Or you just don't have enough time and capacity to make that dream happen at that point, so that's happened with us, and you mentioned the activation lab, which I think is awesome. We've used that before, but we spent so much time working on how to get that survey completed and then put into, if we use the paper version or the digital version, and then there's a common spreadsheet, but I know that was more of a process. It was the people. It wasn't necessarily access to the tool. So that was the other thing too, is like how we've learned that we need to do a better job of training and bringing everybody together, even if it's a simple process where there's a shared sheet, we need to have continuous connection to that. And so that's something we've learned over time too. Just keep coming back to it and use it, put it in the processes.
All righty, thanks Travis and Natalie. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next two tours. That kind of take the next step up. And so our next tour video comes from Natalie. So Natalie and her team track K-12 engagement data in an Excel spreadsheet that's very similar to the example that we just saw, where they track the outreach provided. And they connect their Excel spreadsheet to Tableau to create interactive data visualizations. So we're going to take a look at some of the types of data viz that Natalie's team uses.
So as a brief bit of context, the dashboard that I created with colleagues both in the data office and other programs and departments at my university that serve K-12 audiences emerged from an informal working group that got together and started talking about what if we shared our data better? Because we all have Excel spreadsheets that live on our hard drives or on our corner of the cloud, and we're not really talking to each other. We're not collecting data in a standard way. And if we did share data in some systematic way, would we collaborate better? Would we be able to better align with our university admissions office? And would we better be able to do some longitudinal tracking of the students who come through our programs and where do they end up and what do their educational outcomes look like? So that was the impetus for the product which we created, which I can share with you. So this is the University of Montana's K-12 engagement dashboard. It is created in Tableau, which is software that anyone can purchase a license for. The University of Montana has an institutional license, which I'm a beneficiary of, but individual users can also purchase it. And I believe that it's either discounted or free for educational use. So that may be something to explore, but the dashboard is built in Tableau and then it's published to the University of Montana website. But this is really a plugin straight from Tableau. And what the dashboard does, we can zoom out here so you'll see we're looking at the state of Montana at the county level, and we're looking at where audiences, K-12 audiences served by programs reside. So this might mean where the university is going, or where students who come to the University of Montana for, let's say, summer camps or field trips, where those students reside. So we look at a total number of participants. I will say one decision that we made early on is we're really not too interested in bean counting for its own sake, and we don't make a great deal out of this number because we recognize how inherently slippery it is. In this case, we're talking about non-unique users. So if somebody comes to a museum 3 days a week, all year round, they're going to be counted as one participant every time. And we're okay with that. And we're not shouting, bragging off the rooftops about this number because of that. We recognize that some programs are collecting individual student data, and some are clicking door entries. And so we wanted to accommodate both. We have the number of programs at the University of Montana that currently report into this dashboard. An event is defined as a summer camp, a field trip, something that happens in a moment in time, whether that's over 1 week or 1 day. So it is a row on our spreadsheet, which you'll see. And then you can see the cities and counties that we've been to. A use of this dashboard or a function of it, so you can click into a county and see what's going on in Flathead County particularly, and you'll pull up a list that shows, okay, the Flathead Lake Biological Station, they brought this careers in lake ecology to Kalispell in May of 2019, and they had 40 participants. So it's a quick snapshot. If I, as a member of the public or some stakeholder at the university, wanted to know more about that program, I wouldn't learn about it on this dashboard. I would contact Flathead Lake Biological Station. So this is really intended as a starting point. And then you can see the other programs, Spectrum Discovery Area, our Hands-on Science Center was up there, and a number of other university programs. So you can drill down at the county level. You can also use drop-down menus to the right here to make some other selections. So you can see, okay, so which university program was it? And you'll already see some data cleaning issues that we're continuously working on. I'm a much savvier data cleaner than I was 2 years ago when we started this, but I still need to catch a few of these errors. We have an acronym, ASO, which stands for Autonomous Aerial Systems Office. So I need to get back in and make that consistent, the non-acronym version. We have that with Spectrum and Spectrum Discovery Area. And it's a game of whack-a-mole. I already did this and I thought I'd found them all, and then they pop up again. So it is one of the challenges that this is not fully automated. There are humans, me, people in the data office who are troubleshooting every time we do data entry, which is 3 times a year. We can look at, we can drop down and select whether these programs, the full question, and I can share this on the spreadsheet that we use to collect data, but it asks whether the event was aimed at serving populations underrepresented in higher education, which is a squishy question, but we also felt was a useful blunt instrument so that if I, as somebody at my university who's involved in writing a lot of grant proposals that are collaborative across campus, I could use this dashboard to see who's doing what, where, and then ask more questions. I'm not going to find out which underrepresented groups or how, but I'll get a broad picture.
All righty, so let me get out of here and take a look at the chat and see, does anyone have any kind of more technical questions for Nathalie or broader questions about Tableau before we move on to the Airtable demo? Pause for just a minute and see. Okay, so Kathy's asking about the learning curve for Tableau. Good question.
So here's the limitations of my presentation. I am extremely fortunate to work with a colleague in our university data office who's up to her eyeballs in Tableau. And so I am as far as the process of how it goes, I collect data in Excel, actually in a sheet that, as Karen or Allison mentioned, is pretty similar to the demo that you saw. And then I hand the data off. So I've certainly learned enough to know what I need to do in Excel to make Tableau happy. But I was not designing the actual product in Tableau. I have found just in working with my data office colleague pretty closely that Tableau, and from talking to others who use it, that to get a basic dashboard like this built, you can learn it. There are lots of tutorials on YouTube with some, a modest investment of time. You can learn. It's, as I mentioned in the video, it's quirky, and I think it does take time to become a very practiced user, as well as to do work that is more sophisticated than what you saw in the video. One example I brought up when I was talking with Karen, I think months ago, is we have 7 federally recognized Indian reservations in Montana, and a lot of these programs are serving those reservation communities. There's a drop-down menu on the dashboard that has the names of them, but we don't have a way in Tableau to map that without, we'd need to bring in a GIS expert to layer in some code. So I think for a basic user with a few online courses, you can learn Tableau. To do it at the expert level takes a little bit more of a professional background. But businesses use it, small businesses use it quite a bit. So I think it's pretty learnable.
All right, thanks, Natalie. So I think we'll move on now to our final video from Travis. So Travis and his team reached a point that many are familiar with. You're using Excel or Google Sheets, and you just have so many interrelated tabs that it starts to become unwieldy. And what you realize you really need is a relational database like Airtable. And so Travis and his team use Airtable to track data and tell stories. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at what Travis's team uses.
We've moved over to Airtable a couple of years ago, and it's been working out really well. In terms of the data that we're collecting, I'll do a quick screen share here and show you some of those elements. Hopefully you're peeking in, you see all these different things that we're collecting. And it's really around a common thing of understanding impact, identity, mission, goals of partners, being informed and being centered by community voice. And as part of that, you see all these links back and forth. But really, it looks way more crazy than what it really is. So if we zoom into some of these elements here, we can kind of just go left to right. We've got some common things around understanding our researchers, graduate students, postdocs, PIs, and faculty and their projects and grants of how they would work through, and standard email role and school, college, those type of things. And then for each one that has a project, so projects are things that are either funded or in progress, a formalized relationship. Then we've got a lot of different connections that really relate to, maybe the NSF abstract, the details of start and end date, what kind of community members might be a part of that, that type of thing. And I want to really make sure that we see a key part of our database is really understanding our partners, our community partners. I mentioned before that we really like to ground our work in this, centering of community voice, and that happens through including them in the same way that we would a researcher in terms of mission alignment, values alignment, their impact identity, things like that. So, and then we got lots of logistics on there as well.
Can you talk a little bit about when you see those connections light up in your architecture, what that really means and what that allows you to do that just a standard Excel database wouldn't?
Yeah, totally. I think I'm going to dive into another view because we'll be able to see it a little bit I think a little better here.
Awesome.
So let me do that for you. Now, this is what do we call our researcher database, our contact database. And the nice thing is, once you have your main field of your researchers there, you have the other spaces that are already linked on there. So for example, working on a project with an electrical engineering professor, we can open up and things link and map across from the different projects, the different workshops. So if I want to find out more about any of these things, I could just click on there. And it kind of, everything's nested within there. It's like, you know, you move one thing out and you can open up and find out a whole new world within there. So the links are intentionally designed, whereas like in Excel, this would just be maybe a number field or a text field. It wouldn't link to its own sheet or table or however you might fill that out. So that I think is a huge value for us. Of just being able to have all the different data in one space and understand who else is on, for example, a graduate student and who's their PI, or the opposite way, a PI who's on their lab team. We used to be a bit more in isolation for those type of things, but now we can really dive in and understand the connectedness. And that's a big thing for us to be able to do a better job to have quality programming.
Let's dive in to some specifics. Okay. So you obviously are collecting a tremendous amount of data on a whole host of things. So talk to us a little bit about the most important types of data that you collect, and then maybe walk us through a typical use case for those data.
Yeah, definitely. I think what we've grown to really understand is we need to not do stuff first, we need to learn stuff first. So what do we mean by learning stuff? It is really a parallel piece of the researcher's impact identity, and that could be them as an individual PI and working as a mentorship program with their graduate students, postdocs. But in parallel, and as valuable, if not more valuable, is our partnership connections. So once that research identity is informed on one side, the other side needs to have a connection, and it doesn't matter which one goes first, right? The partner, community partner, could inform a researcher's impact identity connection because they've been looking for something for so long. So that's mapped out in our process now. We have a program that allows for the stages of the projects, and I can maybe show you what that looks like. And we kind of level up and do a lot of that custom connection between what a impact match will be. So here's an example of that, where we have things in kind of a walkthrough where we can see our partners and our programs, and these things are in progress. So some of these are proposals that we're putting in, and others are funded, and we can kind of see if they have support or not. Others are different kinds of project pieces, and that becomes particularly important for us because we want to make sure that we're really aligned. And there's something really cool that Airtable developed just a little bit ago. It is kind of a natural reporting space that we've been using a lot to develop a sense of the big picture items, you know, so how many people and programs and things like that, and where are they happening? And this is more traditional stuff, which is nice. But we've been able to really move into another topic I wanted to get to, this space of telling stories after we move through an event, to make sure we're aligned again to partnership attributes of, this is what we want our youth to experience. This is our mission and goal for our community program. So we have a lot of that kind of built in, and the images for each one are connected there. We have the PI and their graduate students that are participating, but we can open it up to the community center and see where this community center has participated in our events as of late. They're all listed out there. Each of them has catalogs and details. And then we also have a section where they can help us to be aligned to their mission and goals.
All right. So I'm going to take a look at the chat and see what more technical questions we have for Travis. Let's see. I'm seeing, oh, wow, and love it. Are there templates that can be shared?
Yeah, for sure. Part of Airtable's, I think, well, genius, or however you want to call it, it's a great tool to be able to leverage other people's learnings. You know, there's so many things on volunteer management, event management. You know, people are running their whole businesses and nonprofits based in Airtable, and Airtable has, I think it's called like a marketplace. And then there's also just, you know, a ton of great YouTube examples. We started with some templates of like project roadmaps and things like that, but we ended up kind of just going our own ways. They were really great to learn from, and not to say that we didn't take elements from there. But I think, you know, long-term for broader impacts, I think that's a good idea. And hopefully Alison and Karen can help to, you know, drive some understanding of what could be some good templates that we could host up on ARIS. I think that's a great idea. So the more conversation around purpose would be my question. You know, what is your purpose? And then we can see if we can align if we have an existing template or something for that. And then, yeah, thinking about the process would be the next step. Like, how are you going to meet that purpose in a process? So, but yeah, you know, we use templates and we change them around, and we're pretty dynamic about housekeeping. I know Nathalie mentioned that about having to be a housekeeper. It's kind of like keeping your kitchen clean, right? You're going to cook and you're going to do stuff. You're going to have dishes left out. Sometimes you got to do the same thing of monitoring your fields, and if it starts out as a template, you're not going to stay there most likely. And that's what's nice about Airtable. It can be pretty dynamic.
Yeah, and one question about how intimidating this seems to get started and all the work involved. And I know, Travis, you do have a team working with you, but maybe speaking a little bit about that, what kind of team you feel like is necessary to get something like this off the ground, and how much time and support is necessary.
Mm-hmm. So it did start off as a little bit of a moving things on my own to Airtable as just a researcher database is what I'd call. So grants, when they went in, what kind of broader impact consultation work happened, broader impact planning. And I mentioned in the video too, in another section that you'll be able to see, is just how important it is to bring the team together on this. Because if you're alone in getting this done, it's probably not going to be very functional. It wouldn't, you know, meet our continuous improvement space. So what we did is we, you know, looked at how we were doing reporting for stakeholders, and we brought that team together to think about Airtable a little bit. And we just acknowledged that let's get messy a little bit and think about what could be, you know, start with that end goal, kind of drawing things out on a napkin, and then work backwards of like, how could our process help that to happen live? So if, you know, depending upon if you're working with a partner or, you know, different kind of like however your structure is, you know, have that conversation and start small. We started small, and then as people got familiar, they found their relevance in terms of the data that's most interesting to them. So if they're doing after school programs, they might have a little bit different data. But now that they're, you know, I think we're a collection of Airtable wizards, right? We're like, everybody feels, you know, competent to go and change stuff or ask questions of each other. And so that's part of our process now. At least twice a week, we kind of have that as, you know, team meetings like that, not focused around Airtable, but using Airtable. So that's a process that worked for us. And, you know, it's not perfect, as I mentioned, but it's working. It's fun.
So Mary has a question about if multiple users are able to enter data. And I'm pretty sure both Nathalie and Travis, you guys have multiple people doing data entry. Is that right? I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about how smoothly or not smoothly that works with your platforms.
Sure, I can start off and just say that it's aligned now on an event calendar. So we kind of look 2 weeks ahead, and we have all those data fields. If it's a proposed event that maybe even is far off, we would get staff availability. And like, so if you're a broker for an event, you get that set up on the calendar. Basically, you click on the calendar date, all those fields expand. and we can start to look at that live during a meeting, or one person might fill that out if it's their kind of lead project. And then post-event, we have meetings twice a week. The person that was the lead is supposed to put in, all the details around anecdotes, evaluation, photos, and things like that. And then we just try to keep each other accountable as part of, the storytelling piece, right? It's valued. It's not data that disappears. And so that's how I think we've been able to grow our team-based approach. It's not something that goes into a black hole. We use the information all the time. So it fits into our process, and everybody puts in data.
Yeah, and for us with the Tableau dashboard, we have many different users, but in different ways and at different levels. We did a really collaborative design process where we had a seasoned Tableau user working with, we had a working group of programs that work with K-12 audiences that got together and painstakingly figured out what data we wanted on there. But now that it's built, users are entering their own data in their own Excel template. So that's sort of at the user level. They send their Excel sheet to me. I clean the data. I send it to the data office, and there's one person accountable for entering it into Tableau. So we all have other people helping us and working with us, but that's the structure. So it's not everyone is jumping in and entering data directly.
Great, thanks, Natalie. So we've got about 10 minutes left for final questions. While folks are still thinking of questions and typing them in the chat, wanted to ask Natalie, just your overall top advice, given everything you've learned so far from developing your database.
I think that my top advice directly contradicts a comment I made early in the session, but we wear different hats and life is complex. So in terms of designing a database, especially where data visualization is involved, I would say especially during the design phase, you're not overthinking it. So I mentioned we had this working group, and we spent probably 6 months of getting together and splitting all the possible hairs about every column in that spreadsheet. And what do we mean by this? And how do we make sure that we collect enough, that we have enough drop-down options, that we're not limiting people, but we're not overwhelming people so that the data become meaningless. So it was tedious and painstaking at times, but also really passionate and nerdy and fun. And the payoff was huge in terms of participation, because even though we now have more people reporting to the dashboard than were involved in the design process, I think we were able to come up with a product that really reflects the actual way that programs at our university engage with students and the kinds of data that they already collect in their own formats. So definitely, like, whatever platform you're using, overthink the design phase, get data people in the room with you if you're not one yourself, and it's really worth it.
Thanks, Natalie. Travis, same question for you. Top advice given everything you've learned about your database.
Yeah, that's a big one. I agree with kind of getting some experts and, looking at templates. As I mentioned, that's a really good resource to see what others are doing. Don't start completely from scratch. Like, how does your creativity develop? Don't go it alone in that process. Try to get other teammates involved, and then put it into the process and work as a team. That's something, again, that's really changed how we do things. It's not one person's responsibility to report. Everybody's finding the value, and we're coming back to it as part of our team meetings and part of our event and consultation. So that's been a big change, and we're learning a lot about each other within our team, and better able to communicate with partners. So part of that, again, is just, if we didn't have our whole team doing that, if somebody was, that gravity, like the spoken wheel model, like, we don't have that right now. It's really kind of distributed. And we do kind of have a guiding force, like myself and a couple other of our team members are kind of working around that space, but really it's just valuing everybody's input and trying to make sure that we can have it be dynamic. So it is changing week to week. Sometimes it's a simple thing where somebody might just be calling it colloquial something, like, why are you calling that project summary? Can't we call that like projects in progress? And so then we change it, because it's like, again, like not having the team as part of that, it wouldn't work that way. So having the team just gets better, better relatability and usefulness for collecting data and making a cool thing that I do a nerd out on too. So like the nerding out.
Thank you. Wondering about the future plans that you guys have for your databases. Are there particular directions you're looking to go to grow your database, or any new products you want to try, anything like that? Maybe start with Nathalie.
Yeah, I think I'd mentioned earlier, it's been rewarding and unexpected to see some of the uses of this K-12 engagement dashboard. And so one thing that we're looking at right now is collecting this data and representing it. Really struck a chord with our university admissions office that of course has some overlapping mission with many of our programs. And so we're in some really interesting conversations with them now about the data management, the much larger scale data management that they do in Slate, their CRM. And so we're asking questions about whether we can dovetail these efforts, whether data that's going into their system to tell them about a kindergartner, well, it's not happening yet. They would love it if they could learn about a kindergartner who comes to a summer camp and then be able to thank that student and their family for coming to campus, and then 10 and 12 years later, know that student, how they interacted with the university over the years. So, and we would love, I work with many K-12 programs, we would love to know longitudinally what students' lives are like after they interact with our programs. Correlation is not causation, but did they? Where did they go to college? Did they go to college? What did they major in? So it seems very lofty and ambitious still, but I'm excited about these possibilities, as well as making it more seamless for the program. So they're not reporting to me these quarters and reporting to admissions these other times in these other ways. So streamlining and doing more, I'd say, is where we're trying to go next.
Yeah, that's really exciting. The possibility of longitudinally tracking students, that would be really, really neat. Travis, how about you? Any future plans for your database?
Yeah, right now we've got a couple of areas that we want to grow and learn a little bit more around technology commercialization and industry and academia partnerships for our researchers and industry partners. The same way that we're trying to equally weight and bring a power balance for our community partners. We want to do the same for that kind of type of broader impact. So that's one thing. Another part that you saw is the photos that I showed in storytelling. If you can imagine having observational protocols that are consistent across our protocols, that's something that we're working on too, is how could we have a consistent evaluation lens around STEM identity, STEM practices for the different types of programs, and then have that metric kind of similar to what you had showed set up with the activation lab with your Google Sheet at the beginning, Alison and Karen. So that kind of model within Airtable. Our problem is that we have so many project evaluations, but we don't have an overarching evaluation that can cross project threads. So that's what we're trying to transform so that we can be informed across these different elements. So those are two spaces. And then we have kind of a benchmark next fall to look at how closely are we aligned in researcher identity versus partnership impact identity, and making sure that our guiding voices are appropriately kind of brokered. So that's something that we have a plan to actually go back and seeing how community-centered that we can be, both looking historically and then also looking forward about how we're forming partnerships.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right, looks like we have just about 2 or 3 minutes left, either in the chat or feel free to unmute. Does anyone have any final questions for Travis or Nathalie?
I'll just put a plug in. I see lots of connections to Salesforce and different things like that. One thing that's great about Airtable is you can still use Excel. You can still sync to Google Sheets. You can sync, there's plugins to all these different spaces and syncing possibilities. So you can kind of level up, and there's some conversation around how much does it cost. You might have to take that into account. We started off with a small group, and then now we have each member have an account where they can edit. So that's something that's kind of like value. And I know that that gets complicated, but just know that you can use your different things that you're already using. Airtable could be a connector, and you can still use your other elements too. So that might be a way to think about it too. That would be maybe a first step. And Salesforce is one of those things that integrates that we're learning about for the tech commercialization space. That's where most of the data is for that, for patents and disclosures and stuff.
There was a quick question from Cornell about budget for software.
I think Airtable is around like $20 or so a month per user for like the top level, but then you can have people that are just viewers that is free for everybody. And then there is some different ways that you can now use interfaces so that people could actually edit data as long as they have a view-only account. So that's a new thing for Airtable too. So there's lots of people that are workarounds, and they have a free version, and I think it's like 10,000 records or 10,000 automations. I can't remember what, you have to look at the details, but there is a place to get started for free there too as an individual. That's how we got started, and then we just found the value in there, and it kind of steamrolled after that.
Great. And then in our last minute, Nathalie, did you have any final things you wanted to share, or did you get everything?
Just to thank everyone, and I actually learned a ton. And in another corner of my job, I'm thinking a lot about a lackluster donor database that we keep, and I'm thinking about a lot of possibilities to make it a lot more functional. So I'm grateful to Travis as well for that lesson, and to all of you for joining.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Travis and Nathalie, and for all of you guys for joining in and sharing your questions in the chat. I know that all four of us, myself, Karen, Travis, and Nathalie, are all happy to answer questions and interact more over email. Our emails are all shared in the uploaded document. All right. Bye, everyone.